Hey, it's Pastor Doug, and I'm here to tell you another Jack tale. Hope you've been enjoying these as much as I've been enjoying sharing them. And this is one that's called Old Man Jack. Now, there was a time when little old Jack had grown up to Old Man Jack. In fact, he had been around so long, he'd had all of the adventures that one might ever want to have. He'd been with giants and he'd been with witches and he'd had all kinds of adventures with fortunes and finding all the things that one might want to find. But now that he had gotten old, he moved way out into the woods where nobody could see him anymore. In fact, he was out there so long and so far that just nearly everybody forgot who he was or any adventures he ever had. And there was a new king come up in those parts, and he got his own troubles. Why, in fact, he was trying to get a place where he could get his men to go up and over the mountain and down on the other side, but there was a terrible giant up in the middle of it, and he wouldn't let nobody get from one side to the other. Why, the king got all of his council together and got everyone to give them the best ideas, and of course they gave the ones that you might expect. Why, he said, well, the first thing we need to do is get our greatest champion, king. We just need to be able to get him and get up there and get rid of that old giant. And so the king asked, well, who's our best champion? And they said, well, the master of swords, of course. The master of swords would make quick work of a big old giant like that. Just start at the bottom and chop him all the way up. The king thought that was a pretty good idea. And so the master of swords took his sword, which was the most beautifully made silver sword that anyone could ever have, and made his way up to the top of the mountain. And sure enough, when he got right up to the top, a great big old giant stood out and said, "Oh, nobody can pass. Choose any weapon you like, and I will more than match you." And so the master of swords pulled out his great big old silver sword and said, "I choose swords." But before he could even take a step further, there appeared in the hand of a giant a sword that was larger and stronger and of better silver. And with one slash, the master of swords was no more. Well, the news got back to the king that his champion had been utterly defeated, and so he asked his council what he ought to do. And they said, well, then we need to send our second best champion. He said, well, what's our second best champion? He said, well, the master of fire. Why, he's able to just burn things up to a crisp. He uses it so well. The master's fire is who we need, king. And so they got the master of fire, and he made his way up the mountain. And when he got up to the top, sure enough, that giant stood out and said, "No one may pass. Choose any weapon you like, and I will more than match you." And so the master of fire said, well, I choose fire. And before he could even bring out the coals that he made to turn into the embers that would make the huge fire that he would send against the giant, there appeared in the palm of the giant a coal that was brighter and hotter, and he blew onto it like great bellows, and it turned into a brightness that went flying right at that poor master of fire, and he was no more. Well, when the news got back to the king, he asked his council, well, what we ought to do? And they said, well, I guess we ought to send our third best master to go after him. So, well, the first one fell and the second fell. What makes you think the third one is going to make it? So, oh, surely three's a charm. So let's send the master of clubs. And so they sent him up. He carried this great, big oaken club. He was a formidable force among men, but he was no match for the giant when he stood out and said, "No one may pass. Choose any weapon you like, and I will more than match you." And so that's exactly what happened. He pulled out his club, and there appeared in the hand of the giant a club that was more oaken and stronger, with greater bands, and with one stroke the master of clubs was no more. Well, when the news got back to the king, and all of his wise men suggested that perhaps they'd send their fourth greatest champion, the king said, "No, enough is enough. I know that there have been giants on and off through all the years. I heard all the stories about how someone had gotten the better of them, and that's exactly what we need. Is there anybody left around who knows how to deal with giants? Well, they thought about it, and they thunk about it, and then finally they come up with the answer that then one remembered that there was some old man named Jack. Why, they sent a message up to him, and sure enough, he was still alive, much to their great surprise, and they invited him on back, and when he got there and listened to the king, he said, "Oh, I think I know what you got. This is a terrible giant, and you're going to have to be clever to get through a giant. Why, they're not too smart, but it takes a clever fella to get the best of them, and so I might be your man, and I'm going to need some things to help me get up there because I think I know what's going on with this great big fella." The king said, "Sure, anything you want, we'll give it to you. What do you need?" He says, "Well, I'm going to need a little old wagon. I'm going to need a good milk cow to pull it. I'm going to need a pail for the milk. And I might need some, I don't know, some fresh berries and some nuts just to eat along the way, and that ought to do it." The king said, "You don't want no weapons?" Because, "No, I think I'll just go up there and take the best I can to get rid of him." And so that's what he did. Jack got up in that wagon and he started a-going up there, and as he got to the very top, sure enough, that giant stepped out and said, "Nobody may pass. Choose any weapon you like, and I will more than match you." Oh, and Jack got up and said, "Oh, that's a hard one, that one is. I'm not real sure what I'm going to get. I'll have to sit and think about it. Is that okay?" "That is okay." So Jack sat down, and the giant sat down. Jack stood up. Noticed that the giant stood up. So Giant rubbed his head whenever Jack rubbed his. And then Jack said, "Oh, it's time to milk my cow. I'll be right back." And so he went back there and took that pail and just milked that cow away. And he brought it about and got him some of those nuts and berries and sat down and started to eat. And the giant was just sitting there looking at him. And then Jack said, "Oh, that's not kind of me to just start to eating and drinking here in front of you. Why don't you have some of the milk first, and then I'll drink what's left over, and then you can help yourself to these berries as well." And that giant says, "Oh, I see what you're doing. No, you may not kill me with kindness. I will kill you with kindness." And there appeared before Jack all manners of things to drink, much better than just some old fresh cow's milk. And besides having the little bit of nuts and berries, why, there were cakes and hot biscuits and all kinds of things for them to eat. And so Jack ate and the giant ate, and they had a nice big meal together. And then Jack said, "Oh, that was so good, but I still can't think of anything that I ought to be able to do to best you, so we'll have to take this up tomorrow. I'll be sure to come back. Now, is there anywhere I can take you to go? I mean, right now, I don't know where you live, but I got a nice wagon here, and I think you might be able to fit in, or at least a foot or so, and it might be hard on me, but I'll get you wherever you need. You just name it, giant, and I will get you there safe and sound. You won't have to worry about me sneaking up or trying to chop your head off or burn you up or whack you around. I'll just take you wherever you go, nice and peaceful like, so that we can meet tomorrow." The giant said, "Oh, I see what you were up to. No, first it was kindness with food, and now the offer of a ride. No, I shall take you wherever you want to go." And so Jack said, "Oh, okay, I guess I guess I want to go down to the village on the other side. And so the giant grabbed up Jack and his cow and his wagon and everything there and took him down to the village on the other side and then made his way back up. So the next morning, Jack made his way back up. And when he got there, the giant stood out. "Oh, no one may pass. Choose any weapon you like, and I will more than match you." And so Jack said, "Oh, giant, I'm still not able to think of what I ought to do to match you, but it'll probably be just like yesterday. You remember yesterday?" And the giant acknowledged that he did, and he said, "Well, let's just skip all the eating and drinking, and let's just get to the going. Where would you like to go? I'll take you there so that you can rest and I can see you tomorrow." Why, the giant said, "No, I shall take you where you want to go. Where is it?" And so the giant took Jack down to where the king lived on the other side of the mountain. And whenever Jack told the king the nature of the giant, the king was amused. He said, "Oh, law, all the stories about you, Jack, must be true. I've never heard of someone so clever and so bright." And Jack says, "Well, if you just take yourself a wagon and you let the giant know you don't know how to best him and suggest you take him somewhere, why, he'll take you wherever you want to go." And from that day forward, anytime anybody wanted to go from one village up and over the mountain and down to the other, why, they only had to go halfway because the giant would take them the rest. And that's the end of that. Now, I tell you that story because sometimes our immediate reaction is to respond with a vigilance of trying to get rid of something that might very well be to our advantage. And the scriptures always encourage us to express our love in everything we do with great understanding. And when we do things God's way, we'll be able to do things in a way that bring those people who have great and wonderful talents to use them to the best of everyone. And that's the end of that. Hope to see you next week. Hope you're enjoying our Jack Tales. God bless you.